So brief background, I did my undergrad in mathematics and economics and an MBA like a good Indian kid. And then in 2018, I started my full-time sculpting practice. During the pandemic, a friend reached out. A beautiful heritage oak tree, perhaps 150-year-old, had fallen on her property. It broke her roof, and she called and she said, "Do you want this wood?" I was struggling to not have the access to foundries because everything was closed. And I said, "Yes, I do want this wood." And I ordered chainsaw on Amazon. I asked my gardener, "How do you cut wood?" And it's been an interesting journey since then. I'd work with mostly untreated wood. I believe whatever stories, the layers that I put on the top, the underlying story will always be of these trees around us. Every Californian knows we're lucky to have these trees, but we also beginning to get scared of our own backyards, so to speak, with the current climate change. And that has also become part of my practice over time. I'll share that in a few more slides later on. But I feel we're beautiful. We're surrounded by these gorgeous ancient species, and as a sculptor, I have access to these woods which are locally sourced. Most of the wood that I get are either fallen, because of the storms or other damages, or they had to be cut because of an infestation. This is a prime example of one such wood. This is a long log. It was about 6 feet wide, 6 feet long, 4 feet wide log that I got as a commission from the city of Dublin. A tree had fallen on their property as well. And they wanted, instead of getting to be mulched, they wanted it to convert into a public sculpture. And that ethos stays close because every time I've approached a stranger or a friend or somebody has approached me with a fallen tree, that is the sentiment that we don't want it to be wasted, this life, we want it to have a second life as well. And I feel both the tree and myself, we get to have a second life through all of this. So this was, also I feel this is the time that I want to take is to share some of the behind the scenes work because everybody gets to see the final product, but there's a lot of hard work that goes behind it. For instance, when I got this piece, it was about 2,000 pound log. And by the time I installed it, it was 800 pounds. So imagine 1,200 pounds are reduced on a daily basis at my studio. I'm a single person army really. And this was the largest sculpture that I've worked so far. But it allowed me to have the sense that if I do something every day, I can pretty much do anything. I was scared, of course, in the beginning. How do I chart it? How do I work with it? But, Beth, as you said, there's a lot of experimentation that goes in my studio. And I think it allows me to approach these logs because each of them are different. I cannot have the same, idea for the log. I have to have that nimbleness before I go in. So I titled this sculpture as Echo because this was right after the pandemic that I got this commission. And that was when the public places have been open to to everybody. And I felt these happy sounds were back in our backyards. And I wanted to bring a little sense of this musical instrument into this. So even though it was a little hollow, you can see because of the infestation, I dug in and I expunged all of it and made it completely hollow. There was a point, and I think you'll see a photo that I'm sitting inside and working on this log at one point of time. I installed steel wires, to give it that musical instrument essence, and we installed that in Dublin. There are also some more behind the scenes in the next slides. Constance, if you can move on, I can talk about that as well.
I think it might be interesting for people to have a sense of just the equipment and, even the rules you have to set for yourself in your home studio about how you work, and just really to underscore the intensity of what this practice entails, what it means for your body, and really how radical it is for you as a woman, in your 40s, we're the exact same age, to undertake this kind of work as a second career. It's really, truly remarkable.
So, that I'm glad that you brought that up because there is a lot of romanticizing of the work that goes, the emotion that goes. But I wish that there was a little bit more practical conversations around sculpting as well. For instance, I would love to know what Barbara Hepworth did. She worked with very tough mediums, prolific artist, worked till later age. She gives me a lot of inspiration. but I wish there was, somebody had also documented what kind of regimen did she follow. So when I started working with it, I did not have the upper body strength. I had to work. I had to start doing yoga. I had to start maintaining it. Even today, I do keep my strength up like an athlete, like a dancer, perhaps. I do come from a community of farmers where I think we take pride in a physical strength, both men and women. I have legendary stories of my grandmothers of things that they could do, the strong wrist that they had, the strong, and she would very proudly share it with me. And I think some of that does extend to me. But as you can see, I'm layered up. Just to start working means you have to dress up like an astronaut. I have to wear my gloves. I have to wear my mask. I have to wear, the eye protection. I have to wear this myth. And then my mom scared me that the sawdust is ruining my hair and I'm thinning. And I started to wear, in vanity also cover up my hair and gloves. So it's a whole process. Just to take a break would mean that it's going to take 10 minutes for me to get into the groove. But also having said, as you said, this premenopausal body that we have, I had a little bit of a realization that, as you can see, the left image is from the work that I did before. But last year, I overworked myself and I injured my shoulder and I had to go to physiotherapy. And they gave me a brutal, honest list of what to do. They said you have to take 20 breaks in every 20 minutes and I have to stretch. Stretching was for lame people in my 20s. But I do realize that I can't do without that. So besides keeping up with the strength, there is also the post-workout regimen that one has to do. And not to, and there'll be more images. Once you're working with chainsaws, the sawdust is hitting at you at 40 to 50 miles an hour. It's very abrasive. If you don't cover yourself up, you're in for, a good shock. And also, I feel in that ways, this medium is very truthful. You will know the work that goes into it. As a viewer as well, you can see the hard work that goes, some of it. And you can see the emotional connection that goes with the wood as well. That ways, I feel it is very challenging, of course, but it's also very rewarding. I enjoy that physical challenge that this medium gives me. I don't know if an athlete would feel the same way, but I can imagine it is something similar. You go and then you're able to change the shape, and going back to that Californian time, we call something called as a golden hour, where the light is just before the dawn. It's orange. You're out in the backyard. It's beautiful weather. You're just with the wood. I love listening to romantic Bollywood songs when I'm working, so I put those on, and I'm in my happy place. I don't want to be stopped. But I should stop at 20 minutes now. I have timers, but there is a lot of work that goes behind. My kids know that, actually. I have 2 young kids. They know not to disturb me when I'm working with power tools. They know it's dangerous. So we have a little system that if they need to access me, they need to come on the side. When I catch in my vision that they're standing there, then I stop. And sometimes it is so annoying. You have to take all these layers out to know, yeah, what is the problem? Like, what he said to me, like the older brother said to the younger sister, and I was like, guys, it better be important for me to take off everything to hear what you have to say. But it is, I feel, commitment, not just by myself, but my entire family, in some ways. My driveway looks like a obstacle course when we take the car out. I'm sure my kids have eaten sawdust at one point of time, and I'm fixing the snack for them. There's a trail of sawdust wherever I go. Our washing machine looks like, I can't even tell you, because my clothes are full of all this muck all the time. Constance, if you put the next slide, it'll show some of these images.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I've repeatedly encouraged you to share these stories and share these images, and it's not only because they are quite sexy. I mean, just to see an artist at work in this incredibly intense way, but it would be so easy to alternately romanticize or dismiss this idea of like coming to a practice since your second career in midlife and working with wood in California, and actually just the rigor and intensity of it is so striking, and it's why the work has advanced to have such a unique voice in such a short amount of time. So it's why I continue to encourage that you share these anecdotes, because I think not only are they interesting for people to have a sense of what it takes, but really to show like how you have to continue to adapt as an artist in a very different way than somebody picking up painting at any age of life, like what it means to be a sculptor as a woman, you know, as we continue on in years and things like that. So anyway.
Absolutely. And you know, thank you. I think that was such a pivotal feedback that I got when you said start recording behind the scenes, because I always thought people would know that the work that goes into making these sculptures. But there was, you know, one of my exhibitions and there was a video of me working and my work right there, and I'm standing and this gentleman comes and says, so who's the man in the video? And I said, you know, I do dress up like a, you know, non-gender person, but that's me. I mean, that's my work. Couldn't you make that leap of imagination from seeing the work to what goes on behind? And I think it does help to show. But I feel there is also that little immigrant ethos that comes into play of working hard. And it gives me great sense of purpose that I get to have, you know, this passion that I can work hard towards every day. And I think there is pride in that hard work as well. And sometimes when you work with the wood, you know, untreated wood, you never know what comes in your way. And there's surprises along the way. And sometimes you're disappointed that, you know, oh, and I'll share some of that process, how it's changed over time, my relationship with wood. But at the end, you know, the joy of making still stays. And I feel that's an important part of my practice, the joy of making no matter what. And the days I'm not able to work, I know I'm an unhappy person and my family can say, point it out, did you work with wood today or not? It's like my meditation as well. So, Constance, could you put the next slide in? Sorry, the one before. Yes, so, you know, I also feel, and Beth, we talked also about that, right? My heritage of growing up in India. It is, as I said, imagine the sawdust flying at you, but it's a very messy work. And it's, of course, besides the hard work and technicality, because each wood is different. You need to know the variety of wood. You need to know the tool that you're using, that the tools are different. And also there is this part of problem solving that comes into sculpting anyways, inherently. But besides all that, it's a very messy medium of making. And if you're not comfortable with that, I feel you can't do that. And I guess my childhood time of growing up, you know, my grandparents from my mother's side were from Rajasthan, and our summer breaks used to happen on their farm. And it had lots of sand dunes. We would run around, play with the sand, roll in the sand. And I'm very comfortable with being around with the sawdust. The sawdust, whatever I wear, whatever I do, the sawdust is going to be on me by the end of the day. And there are times when you can see the mound that is created. By the end of the day, I do, you know, sometimes I've done cat-cow yoga if my back is hurting on these pieces. But also you can see, you know, not good postures. I've changed my style of working. I've lifted up my work so that my back is, you know, in the right position. But, you know, these sculptures take months to make, and it requires the diligence of working every day. Sometimes I also hate that, actually, because I feel, is the impulsiveness gone away from it? But I think there's also something beautiful about staying with a thought for days and let it simmer, let it sink. So by the time I'm presenting this sculpture to you, I've really thought about it for many days, right? It's a culmination of that emotional relationship that I've had with wood over the days. And there's few video examples as well later in the slide. Constantine, if you could show us the videos.
But it's amazing also to hear you talk about working on this day after day, because I mean, there's an element of risk that you take, because once you make a cut, that cut is made. It's not, you know, you can't like wipe it off with turpentine. Maybe you can cut again, but there, you know, there's a finality and a definitiveness of this way of working as well.
Sorry, yes, absolutely. You know, sorry, I'm trying to see if I can get both the slide and the viewers in this. Give me a second. Okay, anyway, so, you know, Beth, the first sculpture that I made was a sphere, and there's an example of it later on. And I cut it the wrong way, of course. And the joke was, and you know, right, in India, most of the outfits, especially traditional outfits, are made by a tailor. So you take the fabric to the tailor, and you take your favorite fabric to the tailor, and the tailor cuts it the wrong way. And it's a very common thing, during wedding seasons, during special occasions, where the tailors cut it wrong, and you're trying to struggle and find a solution. And I thought, that's the feeling that I got the first time, that the fabric was cut wrong, but only I'm the tailor. I think but jokes apart, there is a little bit of nimbleness that one has to have. You can't walk in with a very rigid set of idea of what you're going to make. It also can't be that, oh, you do not have an idea, because it's a very, very participatory medium, right? So you got to have an idea of what you're going to make, but you need to be okay and flexible in saying, let's see what's coming my way. Because even if the cut is right, there could still be surprises in the wood. And each wood is different. Each grain is different. The same techniques, and you'll see that the same techniques respond differently to different species of wood as well. So there is that anxiety of making something which can't be undone. And that's not just in cutting, that's also in using fire as well. And there are slides that will talk about the fire too. And once it's done, it's like not undone, absolutely. You can't redo it. And once I start working with the wood, I feel like there's also this attachment that log becomes mine, and I have to see it through no matter what. And I've done some crazy stuff in my studio to make it happen, because imagine if the wood's shifting, it's become wider than what you imagined. How do you bring it together? How do you keep structural integrity once you started something? But I think I also enjoy that problem-solving part of sculpting.
Yeah, and I love the phrase you use about painting with fire. I mean, I guess we can look at some painting with fire a little bit later on, but I love that notion also of being a sculptor who then gets to paint in this radically different way as well. That, in many ways follows some of the same principles of sculpting with working with wood, which is the finality and the danger of it. But at the same time, you also then get to embody a painter and like make these strokes and have a surface that looks the way you want it to.
No, absolutely. I think fire plays a very big part in my practice, and we do have slides later on, also the visual effects that it has. And we'd go back to that too. And let's quickly perhaps just show a little bit of an action, what goes behind it. And you can see they are heavy tools. I don't know if you can see here the volume, but they're heavy tools that make a lot of noise. I'm lucky that my neighbors are very patient. They do not complain. In fact, one of my neighbors was very curious. She'd come and see how I work. And I've also had questions asking if my husband is into woodworking, and I have to convince them that's me. But not just that the wood is heavy, or not just that there's a repetitive action. These pieces also, the tools themselves are pretty heavy to work with. And you have to have the focus, because they're dangerous. They carry a lot of power and strength. And so you have to have the focus. I learned also last year that I can't lose, focus even for a second. But that also, this extreme focus, this extreme strength is something that I find also exciting. And that allows me to go back to the wood with the same excitement every day. And we are blessed again to have access to outdoors in California, to have these seasons, many seasons, where you can still work outdoors. So the piece on the right was actually when I was working on a sculpture and it started to rain. It was just beautiful. Of course, I had to stop later on. The rain's falling down and the sawdust falling in the other direction. And there's all this movement around you, and there's just darkness in you, and these outdoor elements. It's amazing. Constance, can we go to the next slide too? So, but this is what you mentioned, right, about painting with fire. So I started using actually fire because, interestingly, my early pieces of wood were commissioned for public sculptures, temporary installations. But that led me to inquire that how does wood survive outdoors? What kind of treatments can I do? And I gravitated towards shosugiban, which is a Japanese technique of charring wood. And what they do is they take planks of wood and then they put fire around it, and then it changes the chemical composition of the wood. It adds another layer of carbon on the top that protects it from the elements. And they've made temples that have survived hundreds of years. It's become a very common practice in urban planning now around the world. But I was very curious about using that technique to see if I can extend or prolong the life of wood outdoors. But over time, I've used it. I was fascinated by how I can use it also as a tool to add color to wood. And how do you paint with this tool? And fire, of course, growing up in India has a very ritualistic essence, because you're born, most big milestones have fire around you. There's either it's considered sacred, it purges. When you get married, that's around fire, you die and then you burn. So there's constantly fire around you. So that was also a beautiful element that I want to bring in. But as a Californian, fire also means climate change. And that's also played its role later on at showing some of its pieces. But it looks simple, like you chart, but fire participates almost as rebelliously, so to speak, as wood, because I can only anticipate and control some part of it, but it will participate and extend sometimes even beyond how much I want it to. Like you see the piece on the right, it's still charring, it's still burning. It will make it suppler than what I would make it. And now I've learned to anticipate and accentuate the parts that I know will become suppler, or I cut it in a certain way to allow oxygen to flow or not flow, to give it a contrast where I don't want oxygen to go and fire to play its part. And then I apply oil on the top so that I don't lose the carbon layer. And the oil mixes with the carbon, and then I get this natural patina that I can use, staining that I can use, and I can go and under some surfaces where the fire has not reached, but I want it to be darker. And it gives surprising results as well. The same tool will give you visually very different responses. Constance, could you move the next slide? Oh, this is a process that you feel again. So you can't, you're not able to hear it, but fire has a very intimidating sound as well. So the first time that I used the torch, I got my dad to hold a hose just in case. But now I've learned to listen to the sound of this fire as well, learn to control it, learn to cut it a certain way, learn to stop it, at a certain time to work with it and to give the different visual results in the next slide. Could you move to the next slide, sorry? So, as you can see, there's such different visual results from the same technique. And that is just by controlling controlling it different ways, giving it a cut, how much do you go in? Can you use it to accentuate or not? This piece on the left was inspired, there's a lot of brickwork that goes in India. And I've always been inspired by both its usage and also the shadows that it gives in usage in the houses, and the shadows that it gives even when it's being done. It's, they're laid out in systematic rows and orders, and there's a beautiful, very modern lines to it. And I want to capture some of that as well. So I made this series. In fact, it's a very interesting story of how I got the wood. I was walking in my neighborhood and this log was lying in front of somebody's house. And I thought it's a beautiful red wood and it's just lying there to be, to just disintegrate into wood. And I rang their bell and I said, can I have this log? Hi, I work with wood. They thought I'm kind of a crazy woman, but they were generous enough to give it to me. I brought it back home. And again, this nimbleness that we talked before, I wanted it to be square, but when I started working with it, it had infestations on the sides. So I had to cut the sides and I had to make it little kind of an arch. And then I was, disappointed that it's not what I wanted. And then I paused and I thought, the famous Louis Kahn quote, the architect's was, what does a brick want? And I thought it wants to be an arch. And I thought this is beautiful on how the wood led me to this arch as well, because it, that's the brick that I'm depicting when it's being made, not when it's being used. The piece in the middle is actually shown at the museum right now, Numu. It's part of the show Made of Memories. And I will talk about these memory pods and use of fabric later on in the slides. But this piece came to me as a as my relationship with wood changed over time, and but if you see the use of fire is very different from the one on the left. I'm trying to accentuate these crevices that I made and highlight them and make them more inaccessible or mysterious, so to speak, where I can hide these memory pods. And this piece on the right is from a series called Healing, which inquires that how do you, and I wanted these cuts to look like sutures. And I wanted them to have a contrast with the rest of the wood. But because I cut them, the fire doesn't reach there. And I can char the whole piece, but this little cuts will have their own contrasts going. So it's a very powerful tool, in my opinion. It can give very different results depending on what I want to do.
I think it's remarkable seeing the level of control you have in the results as compared to the previous slide when you see how powerful the fire is. And just again, like the arc of your becoming a master at this in really a very short amount of time is pretty extraordinary. And just like the range of what you're able to accomplish with something as explosive as fire, in addition to what you're able to do with carving the wood is pretty amazing. And I'm also very interested in this relationship between as we've talked about, this domestic and industrial as we get to the memory pods, maybe in the next slide or shortly thereafter. But these two very different ways of working that operate simultaneously for you.
Yes, and I will talk about when, I use different materials in the work as well. I think part of it is also the area that we live in. We're surrounded by lots, we're known for the big tech companies, but there are a lot of other innovation that keep happening in the small businesses that support these big companies as well. And I'm, as a creator, I feel I'm very lucky to have access to some of these small businesses. And I think I'm also very curious in mixing materials, showing different ways of using wood with, compositions, like, what does wood do when you do that? And what does wood do when you do this? And to have easy access to some of these technical places is interesting, because then I can see my ideas through. Let's quickly move to the next slide and see if that's where we are.
Yeah, it's an interesting tension between like the primordial of wood and fire and being at the cutting edge of technology, which you also are, both in discursively with regard to being where you are in Northern California and all of the experimentation that's happening, but just in terms of figuring out what the limits are of what you can do with these mediums. I think it's really extraordinary.
And I can't say it enough, because every time I see this process when fire changes a sculpture, it is pretty much just an entire thing once it's charred, and it doesn't fade away. Every time I work with it, I get excited about it. Just seeing the results, that, oh, wow, that's what it did. And I feel there is, as you said, the control comes with even breaths. I do know how powerful it is, how strongly it can have an impact on the visual results. So I have to have an even breath. I have to have, go gentle, which is very opposite, really, to creating the form in the first place, right? I have to be very aggressive, go in hard, and then you bring in that soft element of the fire too. But also I feel, the relationship how I look at wood itself has changed over time. And I feel, and it perhaps, in my opinion, will always be an ever evolving relationship. And I'm sure other artists who work with wood feel the same way. It is so unique because you're working with something that's living. You're working with something that participates extensively. You're working with something that's stubborn, but it gives in beautifully if you know how to approach it the right way. And in my opinion, that makes it unique. And because of where we are, we have access to these heritage trees, really is phenomenal. So when I started working with wood, I would think of it like my like a pet that I have to tame and I have to control, and I have to even hide these cracks. And I would follow the natural curve of the wood. I would expunge the infestation, then I would work with it. But I think there was the piece in the middle that's also exhibited at the museum right now. I was working with this piece, and that was a pivotal movement as well on how I look at wood. Is, I was trying to expunge the infestation, and just to see, where all is the infestation, what do I have? And it doesn't show on the side that it's a very thin piece on the side. But when I was working on it, I felt like, oh, nothing's left in it, and I worked so hard. But then when I took a step back and I realized, that's the wood bringing its history, just how I cannot leave my history behind when I'm working with it. The wood can't leave its history behind. And that's the living element of the wood. And I call it my collaboration with the bugs. They're kind of showing me where to go. So this was in a series of destiny. And I felt like I'm just expediting the destiny of the wood and showing you how it would have rotted or how it would have decomposed, really. But it gave me these beautiful organic forms that I fell in love with. And also and I wanted to do more of it. In fact, I wanted to, I did replicate some of that idea of going in and out, but not following a bug, but going in and out like I'm dancing with the wood, and getting more organic forms. And that's the result on the right side. As you can see, there is no shape, there is no outcome in mind. You're just absolutely dancing freely with the wood and that angle grinder. And I absolutely love it. It's brutal on my arms. So I have to stretch immensely. But as you can see, I've manipulated pretty much every inch of that oak. And it is a hard, dense, piece of wood. But I've managed to make it look supple and movement-like. And while I'm creating, it's just absolute freedom with the wood. It's just, we're deciding what we want to do, where we're going ahead, and nothing else. And maybe we can move to and here also you can see the role of fire, right? I know how to cut it so that there is in stark distinguish between the colors, contrast between the colors, and you get to have to see the wood as well, but you also get to see what fire can also do to the wood, and they're very different. They're very different in our outlook as well. Can we move to the next slide? So I think somewhere in between is also that, does the wood also become me? And do I become the wood? Not yet, but the wood has in between, I felt, become a good placeholder for human body. I feel that we have very many similarities. Our aging body shows on the surface. The time shows what we've laid. Each of the log is different, just like each human body is different. We are living as well, So this piece I created when both my husband and I were going through surgery, and I felt like I needed to pause. I needed to allow myself and gift this time of healing. And it was okay. And I felt like there were times and rituals that I grew up in India that I left behind, and I want to bring them back. But if you see, this is a 9 feet log, just resting. Just resting, and people move around it, and I think it inspires people to just see, and maybe even allow us to take the same privilege of resting and pausing and healing as well. I love how, because it's so heavy, it just lies there in institutions, and I feel it's a very inspiring piece for me, at least. But again, I pull in wood now as a human body too. And in fact, somebody said that it looks very violent because there are scars, right? There's scars both in the piece that you saw before, and this one is even more aggressive because I made this immediately, conceived this immediately after I was feeling very raw, my body was feeling cut. And when I cut the wood, and I felt like that's how I'm feeling really. And it's very raw, it's very powerful, I think. Yeah.
I think there's also this relationship between vertical and horizontal that makes it all the more jarring when you think about like a human body and it's horizontal, and with all of these kind of cuts and scars, it certainly has a connotation very specific connotation of illness or death, but also healing and recuperation, that, your works that are more vertical don't necessarily have, even if they sort of have the silhouette of a figure at times. So there's something very specific about this moment and this work that I think is notable.
And I also feel like this is, it's thicker, it's bigger, it's heavier, but it looks so much more vulnerable than the pieces that are vertical, in the same cities as well. They look more like they're they have more agency, so to speak, but this one looks more vulnerable. And either way, as you said, right, both in sickness and in recuperation. Maybe we can move to the next slide. So, Beth, we've talked about this, right? The use of materials and this inquiry. And as you said, I think I came to my practice of what I'm creating through experiments in my studio. And they're very important to me. And I think I will keep experimenting with different materials. I have that curiosity of bringing in a new material and seeing how it behaves, how two different materials would behave. So here are just a few examples. I've actually worked with poured bronze, poured aluminum, anodized aluminum, power-coated aluminum. I've worked with gold plating. I worked with oaks and redwoods and Douglas firs. I've worked with this new composition. So to talk about of this slide, I'll go perhaps left to right. So this piece on the left, I designed it on the computer, and then it was water jet cut. Again, a local company that enables other, bigger companies around us. And then this was for an exhibition called titled Water. And this, I was drawn to a map of a floating city in Maldives, which was a response, to the rising sea levels. And their reason was that instead of fighting it, how about we work with it, and the whole city will float with the rising sea levels. And it was, designed in a very organic shape of a coral, and they're very coral friendly as well. And I wanted to capture that map, but I of course changed a few so that I'm able to make it vertically straight. And I also wanted to have a lot of negative space so people can see, right, the surroundings around this piece. Then the piece right next to it, actually each year on my birthday, I allow myself to create a piece with absolutely no intention in mind, and I just create whatever I'm feeling that year. So this was a piece where I experimented with an oak, and I harvested rose thorns from my backyard, and then I sorted them in different sizes, small, big, and large. And then I started, embellishing this oak with the rose thorns. And I titled this as Taming the Expectations. So that year I wanted to go easy. I wanted to tame my expectations. And I feel that's how we place around us this beautiful pattern of expectations, which is both alluring, but can also be harmful, and is very meticulously planned and arranged around us. And the piece on the right, so I want to play with, I'm absolutely fascinated by the process of anodization. I think it allows the metal to have a color without losing its skin. So it's almost like the skin has that color on the metal. And also, the chemical processes. There are very many companies around here, again, small businesses that do that. But unfortunately, they don't do casting. So they don't do poured aluminum. So this one, I bought these small aluminum rods, and I wanted to have a little organic feel for the reeds. I wanted it to look like as if they're reeds planted inside this curve. And I individually carved each of them, giving them the lines, and then I got them anodized and inserted into individually each of them inside, and give a big bunch of them. I think there must be about 40 or 50 of them. The piece in the middle bottom was a figurative piece that I did during the pandemic. I felt like the distancing, started distancing on how distancing impacted all of us. It kind of split us in the middle. Again, anodized aluminum. Neither the company that does anodization or the foundry that pours these, the metal foundry had done this before. So I had to convince both ends that we can do it. I inquired, the right amount of alloy needed to make this piece for anodization, which was 60-61. And then I went to the metal market and I bought my own ingots. I convinced the founder to use that particular ingot in pouring. And then I took it back to the anodization company. It took us 2 rounds of it, but we got it done. And it's again a beautiful color on the metal, very skin-like, unlike powder coating or patina. But it's tough to do it pouring because it reacts very badly to even welding with the same material. And this piece on the right is actually called Custodians, where I was curious that how memories, back to that memories, how we lose them with the death of an individual. But what if there was a way for us to hold on to these memories and pass to the next generation? And will we react differently? Will their pain of losing, the way they had the planet in their generation make us react differently? Because then, I feel like it's almost like we're starting anew with the next person. So I made these, species, so to speak, who could perhaps be the custodians of the planet while we are evolving. And I do feel we are becoming more altruistic, we're becoming more aware, but we're not getting there fast enough in response to the impact that we have. But I wanted it to be an outdoor sculpture. So I felt like, how about I experiment with this very new material. It's a company called Rich Light. What they do is they re-engineer paper, they mix it with resin. They have a very, less carbon footprint. They offset it very well, and it survives outdoors very well. And for the face, I was inspired by this, decorative way when in the east part of India, when people get married, they decorate their nose and they have a little long, white marking on the face. And I do feel like there was a traditional way for us to highlight our features, to draw that in. And I think it's the same way here. The minute you see that feature and you're drawn in immediately to the face, and then you move around. And my husband actually, that back when he got his surgery, got an ACL. And there was a little band that he had to wear because to get his muscles activated. It was just a small band that gets your muscle activated, to tell the muscle that I'm here, you are here. And I felt there, again, I grew up with seeing people wearing in traditional, outfits around their neck in the same place. And there was a sculpture in De Young, I think it was an African sculpture, and he had, that sculpture had the same thing tied around the leg at the same place. And I thought, instinctively, perhaps we knew, and what have we lost? So I wanted to bring that element in. So I put this thing on the right.
Just want to note that we have 10 minutes. We're 10 minutes to 1. We here with the museum are happy to keep the webinar open a little longer. We want to invite your questions, and please use the Q&A box down at the bottom to ask your questions, and our panelists will be able to answer live, or we'll find a way to communicate. And we will have a couple of more slides from us that will just tell you some programs that are coming up. And I want to make sure we finish with Priyanka and Beth.
I'll go faster, Alice. I got yes, I told you I can talk endless about my work and wood especially. So we can go to the next slide as well. Again, some of the more experiments, some use of technology as well. Perhaps here, the piece on the left, maybe here I should go right to left. So the piece on the right was the first sculpture that I made in wood, and it was a sphere again, but if a sphere is not done well, it looks ugly in my opinion. So I had to cut and, give an essence of a sphere. Jarring was involved. I used 3D printed roses for the homage to the tree. It was, it grew around these beautiful yellow roses. This piece on the left, top left, is the large form of a bee sting. Of course, I took my liberties in shaping it and making it a sculpture, but it was inspired by a bee sting. And it was gold plated by a company that does plating for aeronautical industries. And again, something that I have got access to because I was biking in the neighborhood amongst this industrial part of the town. And the piece in the middle is the Natraj that I created, thinking, what symbols do we, and I'm very fascinated by our journey into outer space. And I do believe that we are voyagers. We will always be curious of what is out there. And I got to collaborate with a company for this piece. They reached out when they saw this. It's a nonprofit organization called Lunar Arc. And their mission is to democratize the access to outer space and say who gets to participate here, who gets to be here, and how many voices do we get to connect the link from here to there. So this piece was actually sent on January 13th in collaboration between Lunar Arc and NASA, along with the first seed bank outside of planet Earth. And I believe it should land end of February. And if it does, it'll be amazing to have Nataraj. It's an ancient symbol from India. I think it's been growing strong as a bronze sculpture since 10th century. And I was curious about this form, not just from the symbolism part of it, but from the creation part of it. What does it take to create this? Because I do believe a lot of symbols that are around this piece enable it to be poured well, because usually we have gatings around a sculpture when you pour and you cut those gatings, they're unwanted. But in this form, these gatings play such a big part in visualizing what the Nataraj is. In fact, even if you take the main form, you just leave the gating, people will still see Nataraj who are familiar with it. So I went in my quest to understand more about this ancient. I wouldn't even say ancient because it's still surviving. I don't even know if there's a term for something that's survived thousands of years and still continue to be in practice. So it's neither contemporary nor ancient. It's just surviving beautifully. I went with an art historian, Shreya, and we both wanted to inquire about how do you make these sculptures and what part does gating play into it. And that led me to make this Nataraj in outer space, and that led it for Nataraj to be out on the moon. And if a symbol that has survived test of time, I'm glad that it's heading towards a new place for humanity, perhaps. And the next slide. Sorry. So this was, these two pieces on the left and the right are actually part of the museum, the show as well. And they're from my series titled Memories. And this is where I inquired, if memories can take physical shape, what shape would they be? And I thought they'll be round and soft and glowy. But also back to the concept of memories, I moved across 3 continents, and I felt in these moods, the only thing I could count on bringing with me were my memories. But also imagine this, to quote Schrodinger, this all that is within you. And this life that is within you is not real, but it's the most real thing. And I'm very intrigued by how we play with memory, what memory, the role that memory plays on us. And I was told that we don't have, every time you interact with a memory changes. So there is no truth, but it, in my opinion, is the most absolute truth as well for an individual. So yeah, I play with memories. The piece on the right was inspired by a medieval tower that was built by a Pashtun leader, Sher Shah Suri, and he built it along the Grand Trunk in the north part of India, and they're still standing there beautifully. And there was this beautiful memory of my dad driving us through the fields to go visit my grandparents. The fields on both sides. That's why I chose green color for the memory pods. But it's also, he would tell us to engage. Imagine 3 young kids in the car and say, go find, who's going to find the next Kos Minar. And the word itself, Kos is an ancient term of Sanskrit word for miles of distance. And Minar is a Persian term, Urdu term for, Arabic term for Minar, sorry. But I felt like this amalgamation of itself of 2 words is actually the representation of my childhood, of diversity in India. But also these ancient things that are still there, harmlessly, nobody focuses on them, perhaps, but they're there for anybody to find. And I feel, that's the diasporic statement, perhaps. A lot of these ideas may be, the cradle may be the home country, but the playground happens to be here. And perhaps we say things that are completely overlooked in the home country as well, because they're only alive in our memories in many ways. but also back to the materials that we bring. So the piece in the middle was also commissioned by the city of Dublin. Again, another tree that had fallen. I cut it in the middle. I was confined to the shape of the wood, but I wanted it to again have a little sense of movement. So I carve in, give you that sense of movement, and then I ran a social media campaign to collect toys from the community, and I installed those toys inside. So again, lots of memory, nostalgia. But I don't know if you can see, there's a beautiful small peacock toy inside here. And I do know, I can, and extrapolate and see that that must be from an Indian diasporic household that has donated this toy because it came from India. And there is the silk route, the New Age silk route. And it isn't an established route of shops, but it is this casual way that we bring things in a suitcases with us back home. And then we use these materials in our everyday life. And as an artist, we use them in our artwork and then share it with the wider audiences. And then this material comes into play in our life here in California. And I think there's a beautiful route of both ideas and materials. And we have access to all these interesting materials. And you see some of it into play with other artists' work as well in this show. And the next slide as well. I'm going to be super fast. So this, we have two very important heritage tree species around our neighborhoods. One of them is oak, the other one is redwood. Oak is extremely dense, has a lifespan of about 100 to 300. Redwoods go from 500 to even more. These ancient species, I feel, have had a very different response to the same practice that I have, both of firing and also of using an angle grinder. In fact, I wasn't happy. I had to move to softer woods because I'd overworked my shoulders, and I don't know why I did not use them in my practice so far. But when I started, working with them, as I said, playing really with dancing, and I felt it was too eager, it did not give me the same resistance as an oak. But when I charred it, and Beth, as you mentioned, right, to have that control, and you have to have that even breaths. In fact, I got so excited when I got those results. I had to pause, and then I had to calm myself, and then I go back in with my charring. But you can see these lines. And I often get to ask, how do you get these lines? It's a simple mechanism where I take away the mass, but I increase the surface. So you see, every time I'm grinding, I'm taking away the mass. So I think I start with and I make it 3x, surface. I expand the surface, but I reduce the mass, and that contours these lines in a way that you get these rims. But when I char them, they respond, each layer responds differently, and I can control the fire to kind of highlight some of these lines. But to me, these lines are are kind of a map of our ecology that the tree carries on its body, because each line will tell you the growth that the tree had that year, and the growth will depend on the kind of environment the tree had. So if we had a great year with rain, the tree will have a good growth. There'll be a wider line. But if a year of drought, the tree won't have a good growth, and there'll be a smaller line. So I truly believe these are the maps of our ecology of all these years, for millennia, on the body of the tree that I get to show to my viewers. Yeah. And we run 1 hour.
We're just about at 1:01 p.m. I haven't seen any questions in the Q&A, so I'd love to, Beth, have you give any parting thoughts. And I really want to thank everyone for joining today. We've had so much information. Priyanka, I thank you for sharing so much of your practice and being a part of our exhibition. We invite you all to come see the exhibition. And thank you. Beth, please share any last words with us.
I just wanted to say thank you, and how much I enjoyed this deep dive into Priyanka's thinking and work, and just seeing the curve of the arc of the work evolve over time, and the way that you're discussing it evolve over time is really inspiring. And so I wish I could be there in person, but thank you so much for including me.
Thank you. Thank you. And Priyanka, thank you so much.
Yes, I'm going to go drink some tea after all this talk.
Yeah. We will share information about the upcoming programs that we will have with our other artists, and feel free to email us here at NUMU if you have any questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Alison. It was a pleasure sharing my work with everybody.
Thank you.